We want to make it more of him in our families. Do you really want to do that? Do you really? Or are you just giving him lip service? Do you really want to make him more? Then you need to come up with a strategy, dads, moms. Joshua 10, verse 1. If you've got that, let's all stand out of respect for God's word this morning, and we'll read this and pray together. There's a lot of tough names in this passage, so I'll do my best. But if I mispronounce them, I'm not an Israeli, so I don't know exactly the proper pronunciation, but I will do my best, okay? Here we go. Now, King Adonai-Zadok of Jerusalem heard that Joshua had captured Ai and completely destroyed it, treating Ai and its kings as he had Jericho and its king, and that the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were living among them. So Adonai-Zadok and his people were greatly alarmed because Gibeon was a large city, like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all its men were warriors. Therefore, King Adonai-Zadok of Jerusalem sent word to King Hoham and of Hebron, King Purim of Jarmuth, and King Jaffa of Lachish, and King Debir of Eglon, saying, "Come up and help me. We will attack Gibeon, because they have made peace with Joshua and the Israelites." So the 5 Amorite kings, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces, advanced with all their armies, besieged Gibeon, and fought against it. Then the men of Gibeon sent word to Joshua at the camp of Gilgal, "Don't give up on your servants. Come quickly and save us. Help us, for all the Amorite kings living in the hill country have joined forces against us." So Joshua and all his troops, including all of his what kind of soldiers? His best ones, came up from Gilgal. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, for I have handed them over to you. Not one of them will be able to stand against you." Let's pray. God, we thank you for this study in the life of Joshua, and just how it's not always a lot of what in character studies of what they say. Sometimes it is, but it's in their actions. And I think we've learned a lot. I know I've learned a lot in just watching the actions of Joshua. And today, Lord, we want to look at him today in this situation. Help me to give the background to what's going on here clearly, quickly, so that we can hear what it is that you have in store for us today. The challenge that you want to pose before our families and us as individuals, whether we're students, mom or dad, grandma or grandpa, it doesn't matter. You want to lead us. And so, Lord, we ask you to help us to see in this great way of how Joshua made you greater. There's more of you and less of him in his life and every aspect. So, Lord, just be in here today and teach us and encourage us. In Jesus' name, we say, pray this. Amen. You may be seated. So I'm thinking about fear a little bit, right? It kind of seems like the running theme of Joshua. Just things that we're afraid of. So kind of be getting that in your mind, and not just things that people are afraid of, because we all can kind of list that, but what are you afraid of? And we won't be able to share a lot, but I want to get a couple of examples rolling here in just a minute. But you'd think in the book of Joshua, out of all these things that the Israelites went through up until this point, that the one thing that they wouldn't have much of is fear, because they have seen a lot, right? But we'll see in just a minute, that's not the case because of the words of the Lord and his encouragement to them. But it gives us encouragement today, because no matter what, he's saying those same words to us. So let me just see a couple of hands and a few hands. Just throw something out to me about that you're afraid of. What are you afraid of? Heights. Is that what you said too, somebody? How many are afraid of heights? Anything up high? Yeah, that's quite a few, right? Everybody get up high. It's a little bit frightening. What else? Something else you're afraid of? Losing one of your kids. Absolutely. That's a fear of, and especially today is Father's Day. Mother's Day is when we started the family series. I think that's a huge fear that often we all have. Other fears. Anybody else? Anybody else have that fear? Losing one of your kids. Yeah, absolutely. Other fears. I can't hear you. Possums. I got a cure for opossums. I'm not even going to ask you that question. One more. Shout it out. Public speaking. Say it louder. Losing a pet. All right. Public speaking. Anybody afraid of? They say public speaking is like the second next to dying is it's almost above dying. I mean, people would rather die than public speak, right? So there's all these things that they're afraid of. And, first service, somebody said failure. Fear of failing. And I want to just think about that, because there's always things that you and I are going to be, that's an emotion. And one thing we know about the fear is God gave us, we know that the body, medical researchers have said that the body, when it was afraid, in a state of fear, there's a lot of senses that are heightened, that are needed, that help us. Our eyesight gets better, actually, when you're afraid. And, other things like digestion starts to slow down because the body sends blood to like your legs and arms so you could fight or run if you have to. So there's some things that happen that are good. But here's the thing, long-term fear, chronic fear, not so good. The result is not good, right? In fact, the little medical research says that if it begins to affect our health, fear weakens our immune system. So think about that, in these last 3 months. Fear actually weakens our immune system and can cause cardiovascular damage, gastrointestinal problems such as ulcers, and irritable bowel syndrome, Austin. I don't know why I said that about you. I should have said Mitch, actually. It can lead to accelerated aging and even premature death. Long-term fear. It can affect our memory. We don't think we're not as sharp when we're afraid, right? Things escape us. We don't listen as well. Our brain processing and reactivity, so our reactions to things are slower, and it definitely affects our mental health. So, why is it that I'm talking about this? Is because here's the thing. It's this. In the book of Joshua, right, the Israelites have wondered, it's time to take the promised land, and the one thing that is a constant in there is God reassuring his people to not be what? Not be afraid. 4 times in the first chapter of Joshua alone, it says, be strong and very courageous, right? Do not be afraid and do not be discouraged, for I am with you. 4 times in the first chapter, it's this reoccurring theme, and you would think, here's the deal, you would think of all people in all times and walks of life that wouldn't need to be reminded of that. It would be the Israelites, right? I mean, they came out of captivity in Egypt, and they walked on dry land. They saw the Red Sea part, and they walked across. And the Egyptian army was on their tails, and when they turned around, the waters collapsed on them. Saved them. When they were hungry, God provided manna. When they were thirsty, he brought water from a rock to water all their families and their livestock. He took care of them every step of the way. He led them by a pillar of fire by day, and a pillar of by night, and a pillar of cloud by day. That's pretty cool stuff. But yet they were afraid. Almost at every turn. And then, because of their fear, right, they said, listen, God told Moses in Exodus, he says, I'm going to lead you out. It's going to be an 11-day journey into the promised land. And I'm going to give you this land. I will drive out the inhabitants. They will flee because they're so what? Afraid. Well, they sent 12 spies, one from each tribe, right? We know that. They came back, 10 reports were bad, and 2 were good. That was the way it was. And so because 10 reports, 10 leaders said, we can't do this, right? We can't. Their cities are well fortified. They have incredible militaries. They're great warriors. They're men of huge stature. They're almost like giants. Not a good idea. The fruit's good, yes. Ground is great. Great pasture, we could do, but no, they'll kill us. We're like grasshoppers in their shadow, and we look like that to them. So because of that, they wandered for 40 years instead of 11 days to get to the promised land. And then when they get to the promised land, right, and it's time to go in, they see the river of Jordan roll back, and they walk again on dry ground to begin taking the promised land. And then God says, here's what you're going to do. Your first challenge, looked at last week, the city of Jericho. I want you to march around it once, every day, for 6 days. On the 7th day, I want you to march around it 7 times. And on the 7th time, you're going to... Yeah, see, you got great memories. I love it. We're going to shout. We're not going to launch fireballs with catapults. We're not going to pull out our, assault rifles and set C4 around. No, we're just going to, yes, and then the walls are going to come, and they saw it happen. And they took the city. And then they took Ai. You would think if there was ever a group of people that wouldn't ever be afraid of anything, that really would think that they were absolutely invincible, it would be the Israelite people. But the thing about fear is one of the scariest things about fear is it drives our faith away. It affects our memory in that we forget the great things, the promises that God gives us. And it happened this way, the Israelites, time and time again. But the great thing is God's a patient God, and he constantly reminds us, right? Don't be afraid. I'm with you. I've got this. I'm going to fight this battle for you. You don't have to even do anything but show up. And so let me give you just a quick background of what's going on here. And then I hope you're reading the book of Joshua. I really hope that you're reading it through slowly, taking your time through it and studying it, because it's a great study. But I'm going to try to give you a little snapshot of what's going on here. But I'll tell you right up front, I just don't have time to do it justice. All right, so in chapters 9 and 10 go together. 9 starts it and leads in. It kind of tells you what's going on, because when we read the chapter this morning, you're kind of looking at, well, Gibeon's being attacked. They're asking for help from Joshua. Why is he helping them? They're supposed to be driving them out. You would have a lot of questions. Well, the problem, and here it is, real quick. Here's the lowdown. Right, so Joshua takes Jericho, the Israelites take Ai. Word's getting out in the promised land, in all of Canaan, that there is an army on the move. And there is an amazing God that fights for them. And let me say that again, because that's kind of our theme today, is there's an amazing God that fights for them. And just like God told Moses, they're terrified. They're shaking in their boots, scared. And so Gibeon was one of the, Joshua says one of the royal cities. It's a powerful city. It says, do you remember, we read it just a little bit ago? Its men were known to be great what? Warriors. This wasn't some puny little town. These guys had a military force to be reckoned with. They had some highly trained and skilled warriors. And they were scared. And their king says, here's what we're going to do. You're going to go, because we've done a little bit of research. We know that they're killing and destroying everything in their path, except people that are from a long way off from this land, they were going to be allowed to make friends with. So what you're going to do is we're going to put a small platoon of guys together, and we're going to make them look like they have traveled for weeks, maybe months, to get here. I want you to wear your tatted, ratted, dirtiest, nastiest clothes. They look like just shreds of cloth. I want you to get the sandals that are just ready for the burn pile. They're just barely holding themselves. In fact, you've used duct tape to tape them together so they stay on your feet. I want you to get those out. And then I want you to pack your supplies, your food, but don't pack it with fresh stuff. I want you to pack it with some bread that's moldy and it looks hard as a rock and not appetizing in the least. And that's going to be to show how long you've traveled to get there. So they do this. And they meet up with Joshua and they come in and Joshua's like, who are you guys? Are you, are you enemy? What's going on? And they're like, no. We're from a long, long way off. Look at our clothes. Look at our sandals. Look at our canteens, right? Our canteens, they call them wineskins. Canteens, they're all tattered and been patched up just so that they won't leak because we've been traveling for so long. Look at our supplies, our food. It's moldy bread. It's obviously we've been on the road forever. And we've heard about your God. And we come to seek some sort of treaty of peace and become friends with you. So Joshua makes one mistake. He doesn't inquire of the Lord of this, and he says, okay, we will give you a vow and a commitment and make a covenant today that we will not invade you or bother you. We'll become friends with you. We will help you at all costs. Well, this whole charade, it fooled them, and they weren't from a long way off. Gibeon was 15 miles away from their home base. 15 miles. They were the next target is what they were. So then these other southern kings, big cities, got wind that Gibeon, which was a powerful city, just made a covenant and a peace with Joshua. This mighty army that's getting everybody afraid and riled up. So these 5 kings get together and say, you know what we need to do is we need to put our armies together and gather all of our groups, and then we're going to go attack Gibeon. And then we're going to make our stand against Joshua and his men. That's what's going on here. Gibeon, the king of Gibeon, I've set my Bible somewhere, there it is. They get wind of this. And so then, this is what he says. He contacts Joshua. And he says, don't give up on your servants. Remember we made this deal that we're going to be friends? Well, it's time to make good on that. Because the 5 kings of the south have heard and they're coming to attack us. They're merging together to make one massive army and they're going to come attack. So come quickly and save us. Help us, for all the Amorite kings living in the hill country have joined forces against us. Now, if I were Joshua, I might be like, dude, you just totally lied to us. Why would I come save you guys? Good luck. But that's not how a man that follows the Lord and fears the Lord and a man of integrity responds. That's given his word on something. I wonder if sometimes in our families, if we've given our word on something, but we renege on it because somebody's ticked us off. Somebody's upset us. Somebody's done us wrong, and so we just scrap that obligation. But when we step back and we look at Joshua, someone who always made God greater, and we're not looking so much at looking at what he says, we're looking at what he does. The Bible says, if you've got it open there to Joshua 10, in verse 7, here was Joshua's response to that. So Joshua and all his troops, including all of his what? Best soldiers. Because here's the other thing. Faith requires action, but fear often squelches our faith. Here's my thing. If I was in Joshua's shoes, I'd be like, well, this isn't even our battle. They're not coming to attack us. We're going to stay put at Gilgal, at home base. You guys, good luck to you. Or we might go, well, I'll send some of my men, but I'm not going to send them all. I'm definitely not going to send my best ones. I'm going to keep them back here to guard our home base. But not Joshua, not a guy who gives his word, not a guy who has strong faith and does not lack courage, but believes God, right, of all of this. Joshua and all his troops, including all of his what? Best soldiers. He sent them, came from Gilgal. Now, here's the interesting thing. for you and I. Dads, here's a powerful message for us today. Once Joshua, right, who had been told by God 4 times right at the giddy up, right? Don't be afraid. Be strong and courageous. I'm with you. I'm going to give you this land. It would have been easier for God just to give it to them on a silver platter. And they walked through cities that were empty, desolate. But God said, no, I want you to march around the city. I want you to do it for a week. I want you to send, I want you to go and take this. I'm fighting with you and for you, but you still have to show up to the battle. It wasn't until Joshua sent all of his troops, including his best soldiers, that then we hear from the Lord. Are you with me, men? It wasn't until in faith that Joshua made a move that God spoke. Now, God was never absent. He was always present, but he was silent, waiting, I think, sometimes like he does with you and I. I want to see what he's going to do. I want to see if he really believes and has faith in who I am. I want to see if he's going to act as a coward or with courage. I want to see if he really believes that I'm fighting with them and for them, and I haven't left them. And then when Joshua starts assembling his men, and not just a few of them, he assembles all of them, even his best ones, and his best weapons to go and help fight. Then God speaks. He says, then the Lord said to Joshua, do not be what? Afraid of them, for I have handed them over to you, and not one of them will be able to stand against you. I wonder how many of us in our families long to hear the Lord's voice, long to see a great miracle done by him, but he's standing there waiting for you and I to take the first step in faith. And we stand by going, Lord, just if only we could see you like a pillar of fire like you did with the Israelites, or if we could wake up and see some manna, or if you could part some things for me and move some stuff out of the way so I could get through this mess. If only then. And God might be saying, well, would you just put your foot in the water? Would you just step off of the bank into the deep and trust me? Because you aren't going to see any water part until you step your toes in first. And I think sometimes we're just sheltered in fear and we're just crippled by it because we really lack faith. That's really the problem, isn't it? In our families, whether you're a student and a son or a daughter, or whether you're a wife or a husband, a grandma or a grandpa, God's just saying, I just want somebody in the family to make me greater, more of him and less of themselves, and just start walking. And then I will start speaking to them. Because one thing that Joshua knew is God said, I will be with you. Don't be afraid. But here's the thing. You got to have courage, brother. You can't be a coward. You got to move courageously. You can't move with fright. You can't be stone cold, frozen in fear. You got to have some courage. And Joshua had it, not because he was a great warrior or something, but he knew that who fought with him. And I wonder, families today, do you realize who fights for you? Do you realize who fights for you? Hang with me here, you're going to see it. So Joshua caught them by surprise. He comes up with a great strategy. Men, we need some great strategies to lead our families. And here it is. It's real complicated. You need to be reading this word. And you need to be talking about it with your family. And then they need to see you put it into practice. They need to see you go and do it. When it says to love one another, they need to see you loving one another. When it says, hey, be patient, they need to see patience. When it says don't get angry or be careful in your anger not to sin, they don't need to see you cussing somebody out and blowing up and throwing and breaking things. That's not good leadership. They need to see you actually reading it and doing it. When you make a mistake, then you own the mistake and be repentant of it and not quick to go back to it. That's what they need to see. That's not a complicated thing, but it's hard to do. They need to see you act and move forward because of great faith. Not because you're some special talented guy that has some special gifts or whatever, but because you actually realize and believe who fights for you in your life. So Joshua caught him by surprise, verse 9, after marching all night. Here's how fast he responded. He didn't say, well, let's let the army get there and we'll see how they fare. See if they really need us. They may not need all of us, maybe some of us. Maybe they won't even show up, actually. You know, maybe they'll chicken out. Maybe it's just a threat. Maybe it's just a vicious rumor. You know, Joshua said, get your men together. We made a commitment. We're going to own that commitment. We're men of our word because we don't have to worry anyway because we know who fights for us. He gathers them up. He marches all night. I'm sure they were tired once they got there, but they weren't worried. Why? Because his men followed his leadership and they knew who fought for him. Who fought for him? God fought for him. They knew that, so they show up and they're ready to go. And then, keep reading with me if you're there, verse 10 says, he defeated them in a great what? Mine says slaughter. Anybody say anything else? Victory, great victory. He defeated them in a great victory and slaughter. These guys were totally surprised, these armies. And so what happened was they started to retreat. And then God shows up. And he says sometimes for you and I, men and women, sons, daughters, husbands, wives, grandparents, even if we make a mistake, God can turn it for good. If we have faith in him and that he fights for us, because it would have been easy for Joshua to go 5 armies. You know, every city was huge and great warriors. Now we're going to have to fight 5 at once. But when he's rallying his troops and getting ready for an all-night march, God says, don't worry about it. There's nobody going to stand up against you. A great slaughter. Now they're getting away. These kings and the 5 armies get a little bit frightened and they start turning around and running. And then, let's check out this. Verse 11. As they fled before Israel, the Lord threw large what? Hey, this isn't little pea-sized hailstones, right? I don't know if we've seen pictures and YouTube videos, but even here in Kenner, close to where my neighbors are, my neighbor, Jerry Glisson, several years ago, there was a storm come through, and he took a picture of a hailstone. And I mean, it was like a chunk of ice. I mean, it wasn't a perfect round ball. It was a big, broken, gnarly-looking thing. It was about that. It would have killed somebody if it had hit them. The Lord threw large hailstones on them from the sky along the descent of Beth Horon all the way to Azekah, and they died. Now listen, more of them died from the what? Hail than the Israelites killed with the sword. Now you don't have to flip there, keep in Joshua 10, but in Job chapter 38, verse 22, here's what God tells Job. He's kind of letting Job have it here, and he says to Job, have you entered the place where the snow is stored? Or have you seen the storehouses of hail, which I hold in reserve for times of trouble, for the day of warfare and battle? We think we're great in our technology with creating heat-seeking missiles and we can computer guide them. Did you realize that the Israelites were chasing the Amorite armies away and they were mixed in with them? And the hailstones only hit the enemy. God has the original heat seeker, right? Missile. He controls the flight of hailstones and he took care of them. But that's not even the best part. We haven't even hit the best part yet. The best part was there were still a few left. And Joshua knew that his orders were, you kill all of them, because we're worried that eventually their idol worship will infect your faith. So we need to destroy them and run them out. And Joshua's going, I don't have time. We're burning daylight. We've made a big dent in them, but Lord, there's 5 armies, not just one city. It's too much. I can't do it in a day. And so Joshua prays this incredibly gutsy prayer. Yet I don't think that I would have the guts to do it. He says in verse 12, he says, sun stands still over Gibeon and moon over the valley. Joshua asked for God. I don't know if you've ever been, probably not for the same reason, but you've ever been on a vacation, and maybe it was the last day, or it usually is the last day, right? And it's just the best day. It's the best weather that you've had all week, and it's just, it's just perfect. There's, just the right temperature, the oceans, if it's an ocean view, it's just beautiful. If you're on the lake, it's like you're just catching fish with every cast, and you're going, man, I just don't want this to end. How many of you have been there? You just want the day to continue to go on. Well, Joshua is in that similar boat, except he's not looking at it as a vacation. He's looking at it in a practical manner. And he asked God, hey, we're about to end this thing with these 5 armies, but I need a little more daylight. And if you could, just pause the sun for a few more hours and don't let it go down. Now, I don't even think I would have the faith to ask that. Maybe some of you would. I don't know that I would, because my fear of looking stupid, that it wouldn't actually happen, would make me look a fool, and I wouldn't even voice it. There's been a few times in my ministry where I've been at the hospital where someone has passed away, and I was there when they died. More than a few. And sometimes there's a peace. It's bittersweet, but it's a peace. We know they're a believer. We know where they're going. But there's been a couple of times as we were praying for a miracle and asking God, that after they've come out and told us, or we sat there and they knew that they had breathed their last, that I felt like the Holy Spirit was telling me to clear the room and lay over this dead body and pray that God would bring breath back to them. But I didn't have the guts to do it, because I was afraid of looking like an idiot. Because fear drove out my faith. Shame on me for that. I wish I had this faith. I wish I had the faith to go, God, I just need about 8 more hours. Could you just hold pause on the sun and then go right back to fighting, going, oh, he'll do it. He'll take care of it. I'm not worried. Or, yeah, I'm going to go in here and pray over this body until it rises up, and I'm not leaving the room until it gets up and walks out. I don't have that because I have fear. Fear of looking stupid. But Joshua, men and women and families, it's not what he says, it's what he does. And it's his great faith in who fights for him, and confidence in knowing that he fights for him to be able to ask a prayer like that. And then the Bible says, and the sun stood still, and the moon stopped until the nation took vengeance on its enemies. There has been no day like it before or since, when the Lord listened to a man, because the Lord fought for Israel. And he fights for you and I, You know that, don't you? He fights for you and I. Jesus says in Matthew 28, he says, all authority has been given to me. How much authority has been given to Jesus? How much of it? All of it. All of it's been given to me. And he says, he goes on, in heaven and on the earth it's been given. So I want you to go and make disciples. I want you to go and invite people to church. I want you to go and run marathons to save kids that are dying every day by the thousands. I want you to invite people to do that on that journey. I want you to get on the service team. I want you to take some days off of work and go help people in our community remodel their house and solve problems so that you can be a witness for me. Well, how can I do that? Lord, I can't take off. Because you got to know that He fights for you. And you got courage instead of fear. And they got faith instead of fear. And you go show up and you do things. You help serve. You do things you never thought you would be able to do. When we have faith like Joshua. And Jesus says, and I am with you always to the very end of the age. And in John 14, before his death, and before his arrest, he says, don't let your hearts be troubled. Nor let them be fearful. Believe in God, believe also in me, for in my Father's house are many rooms. And if it were not so, I would have told you. For I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come back to receive you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. And then he says in John 16, he says, indeed, an hour is coming and has come, when each of you will be scattered to his own home. Boy, we can relate to that, can't we, in the last 3 months? Been scattered to our own home. And he says, and you will leave me alone. I wonder if we leave him alone because we're afraid. Afraid of COVID, afraid of social distancing. Maybe you're not afraid. Maybe you're frustrated because maybe you're on the side that goes, I'm over it, sick of it, tired of it, I'm done with it. I don't want to hear COVID or Corona or anything ever again. I'm done with it. But in your frustration, maybe you've left Jesus alone. Because the one thing we know is that God can take any situation and use it for His glory, to further His kingdom. Amen? Each of you will be scattered to his own home, and you will leave me alone. Then Jesus says, yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. He was with him, and Jesus knew it. It's what allowed Jesus to do what he did. It wasn't always, Jesus said a lot of amazing things, but the most powerful thing about Christ wasn't what he said, it was what he did. That's the most amazing thing of all, because he had faith that the Father was with him. Even when he was being arrested and beaten, nailed to the cross, he knew he was with him. He never leaves or forsakes him. And it was allowed him to do that amazing thing with great courage because his faith was never overcome with fear. And then he says this, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. And then listen to this. You will have suffering in this world. But be courageous. Don't be a sissy. Don't be a teeny tiny mouse in your faith. He says, be courageous, for I have overcome and conquered the world. You know what he's saying? I fight for you. He fights for you, Lydia. How about that? Right? Brian, he fights for you. Junior, he fights for you. Ben, Doug, he fights for you. Not just for you, for your whole family. Angie, he fights for you. Marty, he fights for you. The Lord of all creation fights for you, McKenna. He fights for you. Now, if we actually believe that, then we can actually understand how Joshua did what he did and how Jesus did what he did. And how they never let fear overcome them. And it wasn't because they were extraordinarily brave men. It's because they knew who fought for them. And they knew they had to make him great. And they had to become less. And he had to become more. So that they could see a miracle. Wouldn't you like to see a miracle? I would love to see a miracle. Then God's, I think, sometimes waiting, going, okay, you got to step in the water though, bro. You got to get off the bank. You got to get off your rear end. You got to move forward somehow. You got to go, hey, God might be saying, if you're in travel ball, he might be saying, then I want you to teach a Bible study with those families that you travel with on a weekly basis. Step up. Offer prayer before they go out onto the ball field. Invite the other opposing team to come in and join you. He might be saying, step up. Instead of just going, well, we want to be in church, but, we got to, And hey, it's not about being in church. That's not a big deal. As long as you're being courageous for the Lord and the kingdom, and because God's going, that's okay. But are you going to go take me to those families there that don't know me? If you're doing hog and cattle and lamb shows on the weekends and you're traveling, God might say, step up. Why don't you lead a little church service? Take supplies and do communion. Make an announcement and say, hey, before the show starts, we're going to have a little gathering at this barn or this place, and we're going to have a little devotional time and have communion together. Would you be courageous enough to do that, or would you be a coward and say, no, I couldn't do that? People might think I'm stupid. It'd be embarrassing. Then maybe that's the answer of why you and I don't see a real miracle on a daily and regular basis. It's because we really don't make him great. We make him small. We don't make him more of him. We make it more about our fear and less of him. And that could be the problem why we don't see him move like we see him move here. And you might be like, well, how do they scientifically explain that the sun stood still? Well, C.S. Lewis, there's a great quote that C.S. Lewis mentioned. And worship team, you can come back up. We're about to be done. He says, the mind which asks for a non-miraculous Christianity is a mind in process of relapsing from Christianity into mere religion. I don't want to serve a God that can't part the Red Sea. I don't want to serve a God that can't heal the blind and restore hearing to the deaf, and they can't raise the dead. I don't want to serve a God that can't do that. I want to serve a God that can launch large hailstones at my enemies and remove them. I want to serve a God that says, if I'm going to do this, he does it, and we can count on it. I want to serve a God that says, I'm going to send the perfect Lamb of God as a sacrifice for the sins of many, and he's going to conquer the grave on 3 days. I want to serve a God that says, and this is my gift to you. And though I am gone, I am present, I am with you always to the end of the age. Be strong and courageous. That's the kind of God that I serve. I want to serve a God that does miracles, don't you? And I believe he still does. But I believe, and I'm convicted this week, that maybe this God that I serve that can do this is waiting on me to make him great, to make him greater, to actually live in my actions that I actually believe this, instead of just saying it, instead of just giving him lip service. So families, we've been talking about for weeks now, we'll wrap up next week for this challenge, is we want to make it more of him in our families. Do you really want to do that? Do you really? Or are you just giving him lip service? Do you really want to make him more? Then you need to come up with a strategy. Dads, moms, you need to be in this book. You need to be in the Word. You need to be talking about it with your kids. You need to get them involved in service projects. You need to go and serve your neighbors. You need to love. You need to do things with them. Show them. You need to get and make a plan for that. Don't just think it's just going to magically happen. Joshua got his men together and marched all night. He knew that the battle was his, but he put a plan together, and it was a good one, and God honored that faith. Maybe God's just waiting for somebody in the family. Maybe it's a student. They didn't have to come from mom and dad. It could be a son or a daughter. He's maybe waiting on one of you guys to go, you know what? I'm tired of waiting on my mom and dad. I'm going to put a plan together for our family. I'm going to do this. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see a miracle.